Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas, and I've just relocated here from Seattle, where I left 2 weeks ago, but it took me a little bit of time to get down here and to get myself established. I'm still coming out of boxes. You might hear a little bit of an echo sound here tonight. I need to get some more things up on the walls to kind of blunt some of the sound. You may be able to see it, but behind me on that couch back there is Thor. Thor has made the trip with me. He's one of my Basenjis, and over here in the corner, right over there, is Halo. So some of you wonder what happens with my dogs. They have made the trip cross country with me as well too. It's good to be back. It's been a couple weeks, or a few weeks, I guess, since I've last had a webinar with you. I look forward to hearing what kind of questions you have tonight. To those of you that are new here, the way that you participate in the webinars is you can listen in on the questions, or you can write questions to me too. Over here on the right-hand side of the screen at the bottom is a chat box that you can use to write questions to me. The only thing I ask is, as you're writing those questions, only hit the enter key one time, all right? And that's when your question is complete. If you hit the enter key while you're trying to write the questions, it actually sends multiple questions my direction, and that gets a little bit complicated for me to manage, okay? So I'd ask that you only hit that enter key one time. I am creating a recording of the webinar tonight. I will try to get that out to you somewhere around 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. So keep in mind, I am on a different time zone now, a 2-hour difference from the Pacific Standard Time, Seattle time that I was on before. So you should get it even earlier than you did in the past as well too, okay? Let me see, what other kind of business keeping things do we need to do? During the webinar tonight, you'll see that I do screen shares. I'll be doing screen sharing of 2 websites probably. One is Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. That's my Lyme disease information site. I'll show you some resources that you can take a look at there. And as of a few weeks ago, that site is free. You don't have to subscribe to read those articles anymore. So feel free to peruse that at your own leisure. It gives you lots of information about how to deal with issues that you'll see in Lyme disease, okay? The second thing that I will do some screen sharing of is Marty Ross MD supplements to show you some of the things that I recommend based on my experience and what I found helpful with my patients at the Healing Arts Partnership in Seattle when I was treating patients, okay? So with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Let's see here. Oh, one last thing. During the webinar, I actually will post the questions that have been written to me so that all of you can read them on your screen. The one thing, though, in the recorded version that happens is those questions do not show. So I'll be reading the questions as I'm presenting them here to you tonight, too, so that in the recorded version, you know what we're talking about. All right? Okay, so let's see here. Let me try to show that first question. All right. So, hello, L. Can migrating joint and muscle pain and stiff neck be triggered by yeast and viruses, or is essentially a Lyme relapse thing to be retreated with antibiotics? That's question 1, okay? On a different note, have you had any experience using the over-the-counter antihistamines Claritin to treat Lyme? And finally, for pressure on the right side of the head and ear with minor dizziness, have you seen this before? I'm going to kind of take these in reverse order. So regarding the pressure on the right side of head and the ear with dizziness and imbalance, that is a kind of neurologic symptoms that I have seen occasionally in my patients with Lyme disease. So the answer is yes, I have. Why it occurs, I can't specifically tell you. There's a lot of issues that happen in Lyme that we don't have a good explanation for why they occur other than they can occur, okay? All right. All right, the second thing, let's see here. In terms of the antihistamines, so Claritin, loratadine is the generic form of Claritin, has some laboratory test tube experiments that show that it can help kill Lyme germs. The way that it's thought to work is by blocking the intake or the uptake by Lyme germs of manganese, a mineral called manganese. And by doing so, you starve the germ of manganese, which it needs to grow and to live, actually, and so it can kill the germ. Now, I have to tell you my own, so I know that looks promising. That's a test tube experiment, okay? So what happens in a test tube and in the laboratory does not necessarily always happen in humans, unfortunately. And so actually, I have been disappointed in using it and trying to use it with patients at the Healing Arts Partnership. I just did not find it to be that useful. I don't think it hurts to give it a try, but I have not seen what happened in the laboratory turn over and equate to what happens in living people as well, too. Okay. All right. And then finally, in terms of the migrating joint pain, muscle pain, and stiff neck, could it be triggered by yeast and viruses? The answer is yes, probably more the yeast than the viruses. So when these symptoms that people have that look like Lyme disease are actually triggered by the immune system overproducing a group of chemicals called cytokines, okay? And many of you know I talk about cytokines quite a bit in these webinars and also at Treat Lyme, but what cytokines are is they're chemicals, proteins made by white blood cells that see infections. And they're made to turn on the immune system. On the good side, they cause more white blood cells be made to fight an infection. They bring those white blood cells to where the infection is, and they help those white blood cells work better. Okay, that's what cytokines are meant to do, is turn things on. However, in Lyme, and sometimes in yeast, and sometimes in virus infections, the immune system doesn't do a good job, and it tries harder and harder, and it can sometimes make too many cytokines, all right? Now, too many cytokines give you most of these symptoms that we call Lyme symptoms, all right? So Lyme disease symptoms are really too many cytokine symptoms. So, for instance, too many cytokines make it so you can't sleep, make it difficult to think, make you hurt all over, can give you that joint pain, can sometimes give you neurologic symptoms, interfere with how your hormonal systems work. So there's a lot of things that happen from having too many cytokines, what we call Lyme symptoms. Most of those are really excess cytokine symptoms, okay? Now, in my experience, in my practice, what I found is when somebody was doing well with their Lyme, either they were in active treatment and getting a lot better, or they were in remission and they were no longer having any symptoms at all related to Lyme. What I found, or minimal symptoms related to Lyme, maybe they were left with some chronic symptoms even though the germ was under control. What I found is about 80% of the time that somebody got worse, it was due to too many yeast moving into the intestines. And the relationship is yeast in your intestines growing too much also trigger too many cytokines, okay? So too many cytokines from yeast growing in your intestines can look a lot like your Lyme has relapsed. And so usually what I would do is I'd have people go ahead and try to figure out if they have too many yeast. And some of the things that could suggest too many yeast are increased sugar cravings, a lot of gassiness and bloating, for instance, and females having vaginal itching, vaginal discharge. Sometimes if you have too many yeast, if it's up here in the food pipe, if you try swallowing, it makes it difficult to swallow. And one of the big things is having acne or skin rashes show up. And the relationship probably with that is that yeast growing in the intestines release a toxin called gliotoxin. And that toxin can interact with your skin and make it easier to have acne or to have skin rash problems as well too. All right. So in terms of the viruses, yes, they can trigger cytokines. But if you're looking at what could be a reason you've gone backwards, 80% of the time, I find that it's yeast. And I would review those kind of questions that I just said and see if they apply to you. Okay. All right. So let me just show you an article that you can take a look at that might help you look at that as well too. Okay. So let me do a quick screen share here. All right, so this is back at my website, Treat Lyme. And in terms of how do you figure out if you might have too many yeast, take a look at my online Lyme guide, okay? And the reason I'm calling the contents of the website the online Lyme guide is I now am also starting to publish some books, which is under this tab here, all right? And I'll say more about that here in a second. But in the online Lyme guide, take a look at the chapter on yeast. And in here, there is a article I have written about how do you figure out if you have too many yeast, okay? It's called A Silent Problem, Do You Have Yeast, okay? All right, the other thing that you could find if you look at that is I have a chapter on relapse. And you'll notice that in the relapse chapter, I have an article called, Is It a Lyme Relapse? Take These Steps. And basically what that article is about is figuring out if you have too many yeast. All right. So because again, a relapse often will present, or yeast will often present looking like a Lyme relapse. But again, 80% of the time, what I see in my practice is that a relapse really is related to yeast overgrowth in the intestines. Okay. All right. And then finally, just many of you may be aware of this, but I have published my treatment ideas for how to kill Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia anaplasma, viruses, parasites, and yeast. I've put them all together now in a book. It's called Anti-Germ Action Plans for Lyme Disease. You can either download it here as a PDF version, or you can go to Amazon and get it as a Kindle version or as a paperback version, okay? In this book also is the Ross Lyme Support Protocol, which is a comprehensive protocol about how do you deal with many aspects of Lyme disease, and also includes the basic steps you should take to get over Lyme in addition to germ killing. And I also have an article in here about how do you deal with Herxheimer reactions, all right? So you'll start seeing over time, I'm going to start putting together more books that are parts of things that I have written down here online. I think the next one I'm probably going to do is a book about how to deal with fatigue. And I'll pull many ideas that I have here at Treat Lyme into that book. All right, let me go back here. Trying to go back here. There we are. All right, there we are. So I hope that gives you some insights, and you know where to look to find information about yeast. Also in that yeast chapter, you can find information about how to treat yeast as well too. All right. Elle, thank you for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Tanya. Hi, Doc. Thanks for your generous information in these webinars. You're welcome. There's nothing else like it for Lyme patients. On your website, you have recommended the Igenix Immunoblot as a good option for testing for Lyme. They seem to offer 3 Immunoblot panels. Which of these do you recommend? Here's a link for reference. All right. So what Igenix has done in their panels is, in addition to doing what is called the Immunoblot test, their panels add other tests. Like one of the panels adds something called an IFA, which is kind of an ELISA test, which is not that good. One of their panels, I think, has a DNA testing to see if the DNA of the germ is in your blood. That's called PCR testing. What I would do is don't do the panels. It's a ploy by Igenix to get more money, basically. The best test is just the Immunoblot by itself. And you can get the Immunoblot IgM and the Immunoblot IgG independent, separate from being part of a panel, all right? So there's an article I have about what are the best tests, okay? And in there I review PCR testing, which is the DNA blood test. I review IFA testing, one of the tests that I just mentioned here. I review Immunoblot, and I review the Western blot, and I review something called an ELISpot, all right? So in terms of what is, I think, the best test these days, it is that test called an Immunoblot. So I want to just talk about that quickly and how it's different than a Western blot and how it's different than an ELISpot, okay? All right. So what we do when the more common test that many of us have used over time is this Western blot. And what the Immunoblot is a cleaned up, enhanced version of a Western blot. I think that's probably a good way of describing it. So let's look at what a Western blot is first. So what we do when we do a Western blot, we're looking to see, does your immune system make antibodies? Has it made antibodies against the Lyme germ? And specifically, the immune system makes antibodies against various proteins that are found on the covering of the Lyme germ, all right? So what we do is in the lab, Igenix grows 2 strains of Lyme germs. And then they kill the germs and they take the proteins from the covering of the germs. We identify each of those proteins by what they weigh. And through a process, we distribute proteins that weigh the same onto a test strip. And so all the proteins that weigh 18 kilodaltons fall out at the same place. And all the proteins that weigh 31 kilodaltons fall out at the same place. All right. And those proteins, we identify them by what they weigh, but what they weigh also we refer to as band. So the protein that weighs 31 kilodaltons is also called band 31. All right. All right. Now, when we do a Western blot, we want to make sure that you have antibodies against 2 of 6 important proteins. IGeneX looks to see if you have antibodies against 12, but there's really 6 that are more specific for Lyme. All right. And those 6 are the 23, 25, 31, 34, 39, 41, and 83-93. Okay. Now, you have a positive test for Lyme if you have antibodies against 2 of those proteins. The Western blot is able to find Lyme about 80% of the time when it's there. All right. So it's a pretty good test. All right. Now, there is some problems with the Western blot. Number one is that some of these proteins will also attract antibodies that are made against other infections. And these would be viruses, for instance, the monovirus, for instance, and something called human herpes virus type 6. All right. And it specifically is a problem at protein 31 and sometimes can be a problem at protein 41 as well, too. All right. Now, what is done in the immunoblot, not the Western blot, but the immunoblot that is different than the Western blot, is that instead of growing Lyme germs in the lab and killing them, what they have done is they have actually artificially manufactured the Lyme proteins by growing them in bacteria. Okay, so these are genetically engineered, if you will, Lyme proteins. And when they genetically engineered these Lyme proteins, they took out the protein pieces that attract antibodies from viruses. All right, so now when you do an immunoblot, if something is stuck on one, if the antibodies are stuck on these Lyme proteins, they were made against Lyme because these are cleaned up proteins. All right. All right, that's one way that an immunoblot is better. The second way that an immunoblot is better is when IGeneX developed this test, they used protein sequences that are found on 8 kinds of Lyme germs, okay? So it's a bigger fingerprint, basically. And their own internal studies show that the immunoblot can find Lyme when it is present 91% of the time, okay? So immunoblot is 91% of the time it can find it. And the Western blot's about 80%. All right, so the immunoblot is probably a better test at finding it. All right. Now, the problem with the immunoblot is lots more expensive. It's about a $495 test. The Western blot, on the other hand, is a $250 test. And when you do the Western blot, you just need to get the IgM and IgG Western blot. When you do the immunoblot, you just need to get the IgM and IgG immunoblot. Do not do any of the panels. All right. So what the IgM and IgG means, those are 2 families of antibodies. We're looking to see antibodies from the family called IgM and antibodies from the family called IgG attached to these Lyme proteins, all right? And then finally, some of you may be aware of something called an ELISpot test. And one of the companies that's doing that is a lab named Armin Labs out of Germany. And what's done in an ELISpot test is we're looking to see, is your immune system remembering Lyme? Just like the Western blot does. The Western blot is looking to see, have you made antibodies? Antibodies are proteins that attach to germs, okay? And what the ELISpot is doing is it's looking to see, do your white blood cells called T white blood cells, a kind of white blood cells that fight Lyme, do they remember fighting Lyme? And the way that that test is done is we basically take your T cells from your blood, and in the laboratory, we then introduce proteins from Lyme germs to those T cells, and we see if they make cytokines. If they make cytokines, that means they remember reacting against the Lyme germ, okay? And studies show that that can find Lyme about 85% of the time, all right? Now, IGeneX also does an ELISpot test. They call it an IgX spot, all right? The problem with the IGeneX test is it's not that good. Based on their own internal validation studies, it only picks up Lyme, I think, around 60% of the time. No, actually, it's 35% of the time. Excuse me, it's really low. There's something the way that they're doing their test that doesn't seem to work as well as the Armin test does, okay? So if you're going to get an ELISpot, and I think there's good times to do that, or reasons to do that, usually I'll either do a Western blot or immunoblot. If I'm not getting enough answers from those, and I think there's a high probability someone has Lyme, then I might go do an ELISpot from an Armin Labs. But I would not do an ELISpot at this point from IGeneX until they figure out what's going on with their test, why their internal studies show that it can only pick it up 35% of the time. All right. So that's a lot of stuff I just said. I'm going to do a quick screen share. I'm going to show you the article that you can go and look at all the ways that you can test for Lyme. All right. So take a look at my article on testing, or my section on test. And this article called A Review of Lyme Infection Test Pass or Fail. I literally review all the ways that you can test for Lyme, and I give you a grade as to whether it's good or bad. Okay. All right. So take a look at that for more information as well too. Okay. Now the other thing I just have to say too, while we're doing this, is keep in mind that diagnosing Lyme requires more than a test. All right. And in fact, you can have negative testing and still have Lyme. There's 4 things you consider figuring out if you have Lyme disease. One is there a risk you could have gotten it? So have you had a tick bite? Or could you have been exposed to ticks that carry it? Or have you been exposed to somebody that might have sexually transmitted it to you? Because there's a possibility, I think small possibility, but there's a possibility that it could be sexually transmitted. There's European studies that show maybe mosquitoes, mites, and flies transmitted as well too. So it may be more than ticks that transmit it. But if you've had tick exposures, or you're in an area where there's a lot of ticks, like New Jersey, where 95% of ticks carry Lyme, there's a risk you could have gotten Lyme. Okay, so we consider the risk. We look at, do you have enough symptoms that look like Lyme? We consider, are there any physical exam findings that look like Lyme? And then finally, we look at, do you have positive testing or not? Now, you don't necessarily need to have positive testing to have Lyme, because again, testing misses it sometimes. Okay. All right. So let me move on here. Tanya, thank you for that question. I hope that gave you your answer. I know it was a very long-winded response there tonight. Hello, David. Hi, Dr. Ross. I purchased a hard copy of your book. It beats clicking and scrolling. When will the next book be published? I discovered recently that Autoimmune bark, cat's claw, makes my estradiol levels skyrocket. Must be because of the first rule of medicine. Anything can happen. I have now switched to Biocide and LSF. Will Biocide and LSF also work alone as an antifungal for yeast overgrowth, or should it be combined with Capri Plus or another antifungal? So, David, I'm not quite sure. I'm still trying to get moved into my new environment here in Austin, but probably the next week or two, I bet it's going to be a couple weeks. I'll start devoting some time to taking some of the things I've written at Treat Lyme, cleaning them up, hire an editor to help me look at some of the writings again. I bet we're probably talking about a month to a month and a half before I have something else published again. But there will be more. I'm slowly going to try to take most of the writings at Treat Lyme and turn them into publications, actually, because I think it is easier for people to read them that way. But until then, you can try to read things online. And when I'm doing this, I'm actually trying to do it professionally. I'm actually getting an editor to help clean up my writing. As many of you know, when you read Treat Lyme online, there's stuff you find every now and then. I find every now and then. I think, oh my gosh, I missed that. And my editor, she's been helping me to just kind of write in a better way as well too. So you'll see that when you read my Anti-Germ Action Plans book that I have, it's a better read than what is available with the similar information at Treat Lyme. Okay. All right. In terms of this estradiol, of the 2 herbs, the cemento and, the cat's claw, which Nutrimedic sells as cemento, but cat's claw and Otoba, cat's claw has an estrogen effect sometimes. So it's possible it is coming from that. Okay. And one of the things that you might look at so Biocide is great. I think Biocide can work very well as a standalone agent to treat Lyme, to help get rid of Lyme, to support the removal of Lyme. Okay. But if it doesn't work well enough for you, another thing you might want to consider doing is working with the Otoba and combine it with teasel root. That's TEASEL. I am in the process. I have had that product available as something called Spironil, and I just sold my last bottle of it today. Tomorrow I'll be introducing online. You'll see a teasel will be available through my Wildcraft Herbs line that I carry at treatlyme.net. So the Wildcraft Herbs brand also has a teasel product that I'll be setting up to go live. Probably tomorrow morning I'll get that, or tomorrow sometime I'll get that one up and running. But anyhow, that combination of Banderol and teasel can work fairly well as well too. But I would do exactly what you've done. If you're having trouble, I would have gone to the Biocide next. Can biocidin work well to kill Lyme? Yes, it can. Can biocidin work well to treat yeast? Yes, it can. I have found, though, at times that I periodically do have to add something in addition to the biocidin, in which case I probably would do the product called Capri Plus that you mentioned here. Capri Plus, everyone has something called caprylic acid, some rosemary oil, and some garlic to it. And if you're going to use it to treat yeast, to support treating yeast, you want to do 2 pills twice a day of that, okay? But at this point, David, I would try to just see if using biocidin by itself is sufficient for your Lyme and also does a good enough job keeping yeast at bay, okay? The other thing I would suggest that I have found helpful in my practice when I was still seeing patients at the Healing Arts Partnership is be on probiotics, all right? Don't forget to do your probiotics. It's important to replenish good bacteria in the intestines to help keep yeast under control, to keep them out of sight, okay? All right. Good luck to you, David. Thanks for that question. Hello, Katrina. Thanks for saying hi. I appreciate that. Hello, Faye. Hi, Dr. Ross. My daughter is going to start SIBO medication soon. Should she do the low FODMAP SIBO diet during or after the antibiotics? She cannot tolerate eating hardly anything before getting extremely bloated and stomach pains. There are conflicting messages on the internet as to when it is best to start the diet. Thank you. I don't think we really know when's the best time to start that diet. I would probably do it as part of the SIBO treatment. I think you could go either way, but I don't think there's good science that tells us what's the best way. I would probably go ahead, especially if she's having a lot of reactivity to food, I'd probably go on the FODMAP diet. And then I would also get started on the medications that she has for the SIBO. That's how I would suggest handling it. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Faye. Good luck to your daughter. Hello, Katrina. See, my question is, can Lyme and Bartonella be passed between couples? The answer, okay, so in terms of can Lyme be sexually transmitted, here's what we know. We don't have good science that says it is. I just want to be clear about that. In my practice, what I saw at the Healing Arts Partnership is that around 15% of couples both had symptoms that look like Lyme. And if I wound up testing both people in the couple, they both would have Lyme. So I think there is the possibility it can be transmitted sexually, but there's no hard scientific proof. The other thing we know is that there's studies that show it's in the male ejaculate and in the female vaginal fluid. 2 separate studies that I'm aware of have been done looking at that. One study found that in males that had Lyme, 50% of the time it was in the ejaculate. And in that same study, 100% of females that had Lyme, it was showing up in their vaginal fluid 100% of the time. Second study was done essentially the same study repeated by a different group. And what they found is that it was 100% in the male ejaculate, 50% of the time in the vaginal fluid, okay? But the issue is, yes, it can be in the fluids. Then we also know there was a study that if you start reading about sexual transmission on Lyme, you're going to run into just a horrible study. It was a study conducted by Stricker and a group of his colleagues. And the reason I call it a horrible study is they were out, Stricker especially was out saying that based on this study of 13 people, that we have more to fear in our bedroom than we do in our backyard, something to that effect, and which is just outrageous. Okay, so there's problems with the study. The study involved only 13 people. All right, so anything that only involves 13 people, that's not a large enough group of people studied to make any solid conclusions. Okay, that's one problem. In the study, what they did is of these 13 people, they looked at the male ejaculate and they looked at the vaginal fluid, and they were able to tell what specific strain of Lyme was in these fluids. And in this study of 13 people, there were 6 people that were coupled. That is male-female couples. Okay, so 3 couples made up those 6 people. And what they found is that the male and female in each of these couples had identical strains of Lyme. So they took that as proof that Lyme can be sexually transmitted, okay? Now, here's the problem with that. Number one, you can't conclude anything based on studies of 13 people. It's just not large enough. There's a lot of possibilities of error that can happen in that. Okay, that's number one. Number two, they did not control for the last time that the male ejaculated in the female. All right. So when we find vaginal in the vaginal fluid of female, when we find Lyme is there, it's either because it's from her blood leaking through blood vessels into her vaginal fluid. Okay. All right. So it's from her getting into her vaginal fluid, or her male partner left a deposit there, and we happen to be measuring what he left. That doesn't necessarily going to get into her bloodstream or infect her. It's just laying there in the vaginal fluid. Okay. So we don't know when the last time the men ejaculated in their female partners, nor do we know how long Lyme actually lives in vaginal fluid after it's been deposited there. All right. So I have no idea what that study actually meant, but it's not a valid study. And if you read it, ignore it. It's just a horrid study. So what I can tell you is, based on experience in my practice, I think it's going to be transmitted up to 15% of the time. Okay. All right. What about Bartonella? Well, there's no solid studies that prove that Bartonella is sexually transmitted, but similar bacteria are sexually transmitted. And because of that, and because of anecdotal evidence, meaning we see occasionally that somebody will come down with Bartonella, we think there is a chance that Bartonella can be sexually transmitted. But I want to be clear, there's no scientific proof of that point either. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Katrina. I hope that gives you some information there. Actually, let me just show you something you can look at a little bit more, because I know that may raise a lot of questions for you. And rather than go through every question that might bring up, I did write an article at one point that looked at the issue of sexual transmission, and has a bunch of questions. I review questions that people might have about what that means. So let me do a quick screen share here. So it would be in the transmission chapter. And it's this article called "Can Lyme Be Sexually Transmitted? Yes." And so there's three questions I look at, and they are: should I have my healthy sexual partner tested for Lyme disease? But shouldn't I have my sexual partner tested to prevent him or her from transmitting the germ back to me during or after treatment? And should I sell my new sexual partner that I have Lyme? Should we use condoms? Okay. So I review all of that, so you can take a look at that as well. Okay. All right. All right. Let me go back here. All right, there you go. Good luck to you. Hello, Tracy. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Congrats on your move. Hopefully Texas will be more Lyme literate, medical doctor friendly. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on using PQQ and ubiquinol for mitochondria and energy issues in Lyme and co-infections. So I actually don't know about PQQ. I'll have to look into that one, so I can't comment about that. Ubiquinol, also known as CoQ10 or a form of coenzyme Q10, can be helpful for your mitochondria energy factories to work, okay? So everyone, mitochondria are energy factories that are found in every cell in our body. And by some estimates, cells have anywhere from 300 to 400 mitochondria. Inside mitochondria, sugar and fat are burned through a bunch of chemical reactions into cell fuel, okay? Cell fuel is something called ATP. Now, to carry out in that process of creating cell fuel, a lot of the chemical reactions need electrons, okay? Or part of the process involves using and transporting and moving around electrons, all right? And one of the things that helps carry those electrons is coenzyme Q10, all right, or ubiquinol, either form. So it could help your mitochondria work better, all right? Now, one of the things that happens, so let me talk a little bit about mitochondria dysfunction in Lyme disease, all right? So I usually will suggest that somebody that has ongoing fatigue that is not lifting, is not improving, after about 6 to 9 months of doing some of the standard steps that I talk about in the Ross Lyme support protocol, and I'll show you that in a minute. If you follow the basic steps of the Ross Lyme support protocol, and by 6 to 9 months, your energy still isn't budging, then I suggest you might want to take steps to fix your mitochondria. You might have mitochondria dysfunction, okay? And specifically what happens is the mitochondria, which live in our cells, have a fat membrane layer that makes up their covering. It's a double layer of fat. And that fat layer can get injured from too many oxidizing agents being made as part of Lyme disease. Your immune system trying to get rid of Lyme. There's an overproduction of oxidizing agents. Oxidizing agents damage fat membranes, okay? I mean, many of you are probably familiar with the idea in anti-aging medicine. We talk about using antioxidants, all right? It's because oxidizing agents create cell injury or even aging, for instance, okay? And those oxidizing agents also damage the covering of the mitochondria. Now, you need a healthy mitochondria membrane for two reasons. Number one, a healthy membrane is needed to carry fuel to the inside of the mitochondria, and that fuel is sugar and fat. Okay. The second thing that's needed, the reason you need healthy mitochondria or covering of your mitochondria, is that mitochondria membrane donates electrons into a lot of those chemical reactions that I was just describing. Okay. So if it gets injured, it can't generate enough energy. And the step that I like to do before going to the coenzyme Q10 is to repair the membrane, okay? And what repairs the membrane is to take the fats that make up that membrane. My preferred way of doing that is using a product by Research Nutritionals called NT Factor Energy. The NT Factor Energy has NT factor in it, which is these fats that make up the mitochondria encapsulated in a way that they get absorbed. And in addition, Research Nutritionals adds in some micronutrients that help your mitochondria work, okay? Now, the NT Factor Energy by Research Nutritionals has not been studied, but the NT factor, that part that they put in their NT Factor Energy has been studied. And there are a couple of studies that have been done that look at people that report fatigue, what happens when they just use NT Factor. And what those studies show is that by 2 months of using NT Factor, there are average energy improvements of 40%. Now that's what I found in my practice at the Healing Arts Partnership in Seattle when I was still seeing patients, is that I saw that kind of energy improvement of about 40% in Lyme patients as well too, okay? So if I'm gonna do things to help support the mitochondria before going to CoQ10, at a minimum, what I like to do is NT Factor, 2 pills, 3 times a day for at least 2 months, and then do 1 pill 3 times a day for 4 months. So do it for a minimum of 6 months, all right? Also, I would be on a good antioxidant, and specifically a cellular antioxidant, and that one I like to use is glutathione. And I like using a liposomal variety of glutathione, which Research Nutritionals makes as something called Trifortify Orange or Trifortify Watermelon. A liposomal means that it's better absorbed, because glutathione is not well absorbed. Making it liposomal does lead to better absorption, okay? And I like usually doing 5 milliliters 1 time a day of that. So my minimal mitochondria repair formula would be NT Factor and glutathione, okay? The other thing you can add, though, is coenzyme Q10. I usually like doing it not as ubiquinol, but as CoQ10, 400 milligrams twice a day, although ubiquinol can be a reasonable option as well, too, okay? Finally, if you are vegetarian or you do not eat red meat regularly, at least 1 time a week, you may want to take something called acetyl L-carnitine. I like using a product by Thorne called Carnitil. It's a form of carnitine. Carnitine is the transport vehicle that carries fat across the mitochondria membrane so it gets inside the mitochondria. Okay? All right. Now, that's a lot of stuff I just said, but let me just show you a quick article because you can take a look at this later. Oops. I don't want to do that. I hit the wrong button. Let's try this one. All right. So back at Treat Lyme, take a look at the article, the chapter I have called Energy and Fatigue. And take a look at this one called Power Up Energy and Mitochondria. This is where I talk about the steps to fix your mitochondria. Okay. Now, I do want to go back here, though, and I'm going to just look at the Ross Lyme support protocol. Okay. And so this is the steps I think anyone should take as part of their Lyme germ treatment. And step 1, these are the basic steps. You should do this even if you start doing better, because this is what's going to keep you doing better. Number 1, get sleep. Sleep helps restore the immune system. I give you some ideas on how to do that. Number 2, be on a paleo type diet. That's my preferred diet. Doesn't mean everyone can tolerate it, but a paleo type diet actually supports your mitochondria and therefore your immune system, okay? Number 3, lower cytokines. Remember those cytokines? I talked about those earlier tonight. Those cytokines give you fatigue as one of their symptoms. They also interfere with functioning of the immune system, so you want to lower those. Fourth thing I recommend is being on something that helps your body deal with stress. They're called adaptogens. The one I like using is something called ashwagandha for that. Number 5, see if you have any hormonal problems, and if you do, fix them. Number 6, be on a good multivitamin, and for that I prefer either Thorne Metaclear or something called a product by Integrative Therapeutics called the Energy and Fatigue Energy Infusion. Do some basic detox steps, and that one is to use this glutathione I was telling you about earlier. Glutathione is a very strong antioxidant, but it also helps the liver detox too, okay? Number 8, when you're able to start adding in some exercise. Number 9, I don't think you really need to do anything more specific than these first 8 steps to boost your immune system, but there are additional steps you could take. Number 10, get yeast out, because yeast trigger too many cytokines, okay? Those are the basic steps that anyone should do as part of their treatment, okay? Now, if doing those things and treating Lyme and your co-infections do not improve your energy by 6 to 9 months, then I think it's time to start fixing your mitochondria. All right. So, Tracy, I hope that gives you some information there. And thank you for that question. Let's see. Hello, Gail. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Congratulations on your move. Thank you. I have Lyme and Bartonella, probably been infected for a long time, untreated. A new and disturbing symptom is burning tongue. I have tried pulling coconut oil, nystatin mouth rinse, B complex at high doses for a week, zinc, vitamin A, neem powder toothpaste, just started alpha lipoic acid I got from your store. Brushing tongue with hydrogen peroxide, CBD oil. My tongue doesn't look really yeasty. It is a bit pale and some white in the back of the tongue. Have you seen this before due to something other than yeast? My LND called in magic mouthwash with Benadryl and prednisone and lidocaine and fluconazole and Maalox in it. I have not used yet. Also have been tried taking Dexilent. Please help. I have had it over 2 weeks nonstop. So, Gail, what I would probably do is there is a possibility it is yeast. That would be the number one thing I would think of. I would, even though you've done the nystatin mouthwash, sometimes it doesn't work. What I would do is at least a 2-week trial of oral diflucan. That's what I would do with my patients. If I had a patient like this in my practice, that's what I have done, and I found it to work effectively a large part of the time, okay? I would do an oral diflucan, 200 milligrams, 1 pill a day, and do it probably for a couple of weeks. In my experience in my practice, that's what I found helpful. All right. Now, if that doesn't work, there is something called burning tongue syndrome, I believe. And I would actually have to go into, I don't remember off the top of my head how you approach that. I would have to look into it. I just don't know it off the top of my head. But I would at least at a minimum start, what I have done with my patients that I found helpful was to do the diflucan for at least a couple of weeks. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Gail. Hello, Yvonne. Good evening, Dr. Ross. Can you please make some recommendations for dealing with die-off related migraines and headaches, as well as brain fog? Also, do you have any opinion on the off-label use of Alinea for co-infections, as well as its intended use? Thank you, and I hope you are very happy in your new life. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Yvonne. All right, so Alinea is an antiparasitic prescription medicine. That is used to treat parasites, okay? And the way that it works, it should treat the majority of parasites. It's kind of a universal shotgun approach to treating intestinal parasites is what I'm talking about, all right? The other thing that Alinea, the mechanism by which it works on what are known as anaerobic bacteria. That means bacteria that don't need oxygen to live. Well, guess what? Lyme is an anaerobic bacteria. So it's possible it can help with Lyme. I know some of my colleagues have tried using it. We don't have any laboratory experiments that show that it treats Lyme, but on occasion I have found it helpful for people with Lyme. The difficulty is it's extremely expensive. And so for instance, if your insurance doesn't pay for it, it's going to be about $1,200 to $1,500 a month. And so it's just not a possibility. And insurance to cover it usually is going to require some scientific proof that it works, and there just isn't any research done on it for Lyme. Okay. Now, some of my colleagues also will use it for Babesia. I have on occasion used it for Babesia too. I don't find it, because it's an antiparasitic and Babesia is a parasite, I haven't found it that useful. I use it kind of as a later resort medication if nothing else is working, but I haven't found it to be that useful. Okay. All right. That's, again, based on my practice in Seattle, Washington. Let's see, can you please make some recommendations for dealing with die-off-related migraines? So in terms of dealing with Herxheimer reaction, die-off reaction, so when your immune system sees dead bug parts, it reacts by making more cytokines. All right. So first thing you want to do is do things to lower cytokines. I have found that helpful. And so what I usually would suggest to my patients is that they would take curcumin, 500 milligrams, 1 pill 3 times a day, or even 2 pills 3 times a day. So curcumin gets inside of white blood cells and blocks the production of cytokines. All right. Second thing I would do if a person is having difficulty with that, or I would do in my practice, is I would have a person take glutathione. And the reason I would do that is glutathione is a very strong antioxidant. And as a strong antioxidant, it lowers oxidizing agents that trigger cytokines to be made by white blood cells. All right. It also removes toxins that trigger white blood cells to make cytokines. It helps the liver remove those. All right. So I would do, in my patients, what I would do is I would use a Trifortify orange or Trifortify watermelon by Research Nutritionals, because it's liposomal. It gets really well absorbed. Research Nutritionals has studies that show it is well absorbed into red blood cells. Okay. So it's one of those products that does have some evidence that shows that it can get absorbed well. And I would take that as 5 milliliters 1 time a day. All right. The other thing you might consider doing if migraines are an ongoing problem, this is a remedy that can help help prevent and limit, but you got to take it for at least a week or two to see if it's going to help. And that is to be on something called Butterbur. That's Butter, and then Burr, Burr. Integrative Therapeutics has a product called Petidolax. That is Butterbur, and you want to do 50 milligrams 3 times a day. In studies, it's been shown to be as useful as prescription medicines at treating migraines. But again, it's something you would use on an ongoing basis, not on an as-needed basis, but on an ongoing basis. It takes about a week or two to be able to get in there and help with to change the migraines around. Okay, all right. Hope that gives you some insights. Good luck. Hello, Priscilla. Let's see. Can a Herxheimer reaction be caused by yeast die-off or only Lyme if treated? So Herxheimer, what I have found that gives Herxheimer reactions is killing Lyme, killing yeast, sometimes killing viruses can trigger Herxheimer reactions. Occasionally treating parasites can too. So yes, can a Herxheimer reaction be caused by yeast die-off? Yes, it can be. And you would do the same approach that I just recommended for Lyme too. Actually, Priscilla, let me just show you that quickly. I think you may be aware of this, and most people are aware of this article, but I'll just show you here. Oops, I guess I didn't get there yet. There we go. All right. So go back to Treat Lyme, and in my online guide, take a look at the chapter called Herxheimer and Cytokines. And then take a look at this article called Herxheimer Die-Off Reaction, Inflammation Run Amok. And in here, I describe how you would go about managing Herxheimer reaction and what I have found helpful. Okay. Go back here. All right. Priscilla, good luck. And thank you for that question. Let's see. Priscilla, you had a second question that I just accidentally deleted. I'm sorry. I thought it was the original question, but I had intended to answer it, but I didn't read it yet, so I'm not sure what you had asked. So I apologize for that. Hello, B. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Marty. Hope your experience is better than in Washington. I appreciate that. Just quickly about this. So I've moved down to Austin, Texas because, as many of you know, Washington State has been investigating me for managing Lyme disease and also for using alternative medicines. And it's a 4-year process. It's still ongoing. And I, after meeting with them directly in November, they basically want my license. So I made moves to get out of the state. I cannot get licensed down here in Texas to actually treat Lyme here clinically. I might go for it eventually, but I have to settle up with what's going in Washington State first. Okay. The reason I did come down here, though, is that Washington State, if they were to remove my medical license, they would no longer allow me to put the letters MD after my name, even though that's my education. They don't let people that are not licensed put MD after their name. They don't let you identify your education or experience. Okay. Second reason that I decided not to stay in Washington State is that my ability to give advice in the form of written materials, like my Treat Lyme site and my books, I could not do that in Washington State based on how the law is written there. They would call that practicing medicine without a license. My interpretation of law here in Texas is that I have a little more leeway. I can write things still, and I can still put MD after my name, even if I'm not licensed here. And that's why I came down here, so I can keep running my businesses and helping you by giving advice in written format. You'll notice tonight, too, in some of the ways that I'm answering my questions a little bit different. I'm telling you based on my experience, which is a little bit different than giving you direct advice. I'm trying to just give information that is based on experience because I don't want to run into trouble down here. Eventually, I will try to go for licensure down here, but I've got to settle the issue back in Washington State first. All right. So anyhow, that's what's going on here. All right, let's see here. Thanks for all you do. You're welcome. Question: diagnosed with Morgellons, Lyme-Barth on antibiotics for 1.5 years. Now, doc is suspicious of mold and believes there may be a link between Morgellons and mold. Do you know of research? Do you concur? I haven't seen a relation in my experience, and this is just based on my practice. I never saw a relationship with Morgellons and mold. Morgellons. Now, that's not to say there isn't. I never saw it, and what I found in my experience is that about when I had somebody with Morgellons, around 90% of the time, if we did testing, I would find that they had Lyme. And I think Morgellons ultimately comes about due to immune suppression, allowing germs that might normally exist on the skin and not bother you to start causing rashes and skin breakdown. That's what my theory is, at least. Okay. Could mold possibly be one of these things that suppresses the immune system? Yeah, it's possible. I'm just not aware of any research that says that. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Cynthia. Glad to hear you from Texas. Pretty soon I'm going to have to be saying, hi, y'all. I actually like that when I'm out around town here. I've only been here for about a week and a half, but I like the y'alls. It's a nice way to be greeted at times. Anyhow, I am officially in remission. Good. I'm glad to hear that, Cynthia. Should I still refrain from donating blood, or is it safe to do so now? Cynthia, I probably would avoid donating blood. And the reason is when somebody is in remission. Well, let me go back here for a minute. So if a person has had Lyme for a year or more when they start getting treated, I didn't say they had symptoms of Lyme for a year. I said that they have had it in them for at least a year or more. My experience, and I know the experience of many of my colleagues, is that we don't think that we ever get rid of every germ, even when somebody goes into remission. That those germs are still in you. Probably your immune system is doing a good job keeping it under control. And so for that reason, there's a possibility of it getting into the blood supply. So I would probably suggest not doing that. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Giuseppe. Hold on here just a minute. Hi, I was bitten by a tick that I took off my arm after I found it approximately 24 hours later. My question is, the tick was not engorged. Would that mean I didn't get Lyme because it wasn't engorged? My main symptoms are leg weakness, twitching, and stiffness. I saw a Lyme doctor and he placed me on Doxy, but my leg weakness is worse than when I'm on antibiotics. Why is that? And can I treat with herbals only? Okay. So the tick does not need to be engorged for you to have gotten Lyme. We do think that when ticks are engorged, it means that probably there's a good sign it's been on there longer. And the longer a tick is attached, there's a greater chance it can transmit. The infectious disease doctors seem to have an opinion that a tick always has to be attached for at least 36 hours before it gets transmitted. But there are studies that show you can have transmission pretty quickly after a tick attaches, okay? They're limited studies, but there are some studies that show that, all right? In terms of, yes, the fact that it was not engorged doesn't mean you could not have gotten Lyme. Let's see, your symptoms are leg weakness, twitching, and stiffness. So when somebody has an acute tick bite or has Lyme, I usually will recommend treating with tetracycline, doxycycline as a tetracycline for at least a month before considering going over to the herbals. The reason I recommend that is that doxycycline also can treat other germs transmitted by the tick. And that would be, other possibilities include the co-infections of Anaplasma, Ehrlichia, something called Bartonella, and something called Babesia. Now, Anaplasma and Ehrlichia, doxycycline is the best way to treat. My experience says herbals don't work well for those two infections. So if you're looking for kind of a one-shot way to try to go after all of those germs in an acute setting, doxycycline is probably your better way of going. Okay, that's what my experience tells me, at least. All right. In terms of the leg weakness being worse, I would need to know if there's other things got worse too. It may be just something you're going to need to tolerate for the 3 or 4 weeks that you need to be on the doxycycline too. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Giuseppe. Thanks for your question. Hello, Priscilla. If your ALT and alkaline phosphatase gallbladder levels in a blood test go up by 40 points in 1 month, along with elevated cholesterol levels by 30 points, is this a normal Herxheimer reaction or an indication of other problems that need more than glutathione to subside? Okay. So when you're on antibiotics, either herbals or prescriptions for Lyme, it is possible that some of those will lead to some inflammation of the liver. The main enzymes or blood tests that I look to see if there is liver inflammation are ALT and AST, not the alkaline phosphatase, okay? I accept that using herbals or prescription antibiotics may lead to elevations to a degree of those enzymes. And I'm comfortable as long as that elevation does not increase to more than 2 times the upper end of normal. So for instance, if a normal ALT out of a lab is supposed to be between 10 and 40, I would be okay if it goes up to 80 before I'm going to react. Okay? All right. Now, I have not seen antibiotics per se lead to elevation of the alkaline phosphatase, except for one, and that is the IV antibiotic called ceftriaxone, also known as Rocephin. And that is because it can sometimes thicken up your bile fluid, leading to gallstones and gallbladder disease, okay? So I don't know what you're on right now necessarily, but if you're on ceftriaxone, that could be coming directly from, that could be leading to the elevated alkaline phosphatase. Otherwise, if you've somehow had elevated alkaline phosphatase, before I start reacting, I would probably have it retested one more time to see if it truly is elevated before I do something else, okay? All right. At least that's what I would do with somebody in my practice, okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Heather. Let's see. I recently saw a neurologist for severe nerve pain in my face. He did blood work, and I have a positive ANA with a homogeneous pattern and also an IgM lambda monoclonal protein on electrophoresis. Can these be caused by Lyme, co-infections, or the neuralgia? My white blood cell count is also low, but I attribute that to antibiotics. Thank you. The ANA and the homogeneous pattern are things that I have seen occur with somebody that has Lyme. In other words, Lyme could potentially trigger that. In terms of the IgM lambda monoclonal protein on electrophoresis, I have not seen that occur. That doesn't mean Lyme could not do that, though, okay, to answer your question. So the answer is, could these be caused by Lyme? Possibly. But I have no guarantees for you, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Heather. Hello, Lee. Hi. Thanks for these webinars. You're welcome. Let's see. My son had IGeneX testing, was positive for Lyme, Bartonella and Babesia. Could it be a false positive? The test was done 4 weeks after an IVIG treatment, so I'm confused if they are 100% accurate. Good question. That's a very good question. All right, so let's look at this. So if it depends on which IGeneX test was positive, okay? So IVIG, everyone, is intravenous immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins are also antibodies, all right? And those antibodies are gathered together from multiple blood donors, all right? So when we're doing remember I said when we do the Western blot test, that's measuring, do you have antibodies that attach to your Lyme proteins? That same thing is with the immunoblot as well, too. So if your positive Lyme test was either a Western blot or immunoblot, that could be a false positive from those antibodies in the IVIG. It's possible, okay? Same thing with the Bartonella or Babesia. If the test that was positive was IgM or IgG antibodies, those could have come from the IVIG as well, too. It's possible, all right? So there's the possibility of false positive here. Again, keep in mind that for any of these diagnoses, though, Bartonella, Babesia, and Lyme, key part to doing the diagnosis is to ask, what do the symptoms tell you to, okay? And I don't get the benefit of reviewing that with you here right now. But to answer your question, just yes, could there be false positive? Yep. Because that IVIG, some of those antibodies may still be around, causing those tests to be positive. All right. Good luck to you, Lee. Hello, Mary. Can a tendinitis bursitis be a Lyme flare? So a tendinitis bursitis, whenever you see the word itis, that means inflammation, okay? Lyme likes to live in tissues that don't have good blood flow. They like to live on tendons. They like to live in bursa. Bursa are basically fluid sacs that separate tendons from bones, all right? So bursa tend to occur. So you've got like a muscle here in your arm. The muscle comes together and ends in a tendon that attaches, for instance, here. Separating this muscle and the tendon here from the bone is a small bag of fluid. That's called a bursa. And those bursa can get inflamed sometimes. That is bursitis, okay? All right. So the answer is, yeah, it could be. Doesn't mean it is, but it could be. Good luck to you, Mary. Hello, Jamie. Let's see. Dr. Ross, my daughter has taken 5 different combinations of oral antibiotics, doxy, Malarone, Flagyl, Zithromax, Ceftin, over the last 5 months. Along with this, she is taking glutathione, vitamin C, B12, probiotic, turmeric, curcumin, and has not gotten any better. Her Lyme litter medical doctor thinks that IV antibiotics are best next step. Your opinion? Biggest complaint, nerve and muscle pain in her entire body. MRI of brain with and without contrast show nothing significant. All right. So to answer your question, let me just go over some things that we do know. Okay. So when it comes to Babesia, and I think by Malarone, I think you meant Malarone. Malarone also is known as atovaquone. That is a drug that will sometimes can be used in treating Babesia, the Babesia co-infection. All right. Now, typically with Babesia is part of her picture, and I have no way of knowing just based on what you're put down here. But if Babesia is part of her picture, usually if you're on the right treatment for Babesia, and in her case, Malarone doxy used together could be a Babesia treatment. Malarone by itself could be a Babesia treatment. Malarone with Zithromax could be a Babesia treatment. But if you're on those for at least 1 to 2 months, you should start seeing a lifting of Babesia symptoms. Okay, so Babesia symptoms will start lifting if you're on the agents that are working, if they're working by 1 to 2 months. Okay, so symptoms that are attributed to Babesia are night sweats, drenching night sweats, like soaking the bed night sweats, panic attacks, headaches in the front of the head, air hunger, feeling like you can't get enough air from time to time. Sometimes people with Babesia have a lot of deja vu experiences. And also sometimes people with Babesia have a lot of racing or skipping of the heart or near fainting episodes. Okay, those are things that look like Babesia. And if those have been part of her experience, and that's how the Babesia diagnosis was made, by 1 to 2 months of being on Malarone or Malarone in conjunction with some of these other medicines, those symptoms should have started lifting. If not, then the next step is to change the treatment for that. Okay, now we don't have good IV treatments for Babesia. I would just switch to another oral regimen. I'll show you ideas about that here in a second. All right. All right. Now, in terms of the Lyme germ, Lyme gets a little trickier. So if somebody has chronic Lyme, and that means Lyme in them for a year or more, okay, that's chronic Lyme. There's been some studies, or an unpublished study done that looked at how quickly do people turn around. And what that study showed is that by 3 months of antibiotics, and that's oral antibiotics, 30% of people start improving. By 6 months, 60% start improving. By 9 months, 90% of people start improving. Okay. In other words, by the 5 months or so your daughter is into it, there's a good chance she would not start having any improvements yet. Okay. And that if you just stay on an oral regimen longer, things could turn around. All right. I don't know that I would rush off to IV antibiotics yet. In my experience, I didn't. I would usually treat somebody for a good 6 to 9 months before I considered going that way. But I would consider making some changes in that regimen, okay? And maybe even to different oral agents, okay? The other thing you need to make sure that you're doing, because it's more than the antibiotics that are going to get a person well, I like that you have your daughter on the curcumin. That's lowering cytokines. One thing I would find helpful also to boost the immune system and to help body adapt is to be on ashwagandha. You'll find that as part of the Ross Lyme support protocol. Okay. I like the fact that she's on the glutathione. That's helping with her detox. So it looks like you're doing some good basic steps, but it could just be that it needs more time. All right. All right. Let me do a quick screen share here for you. I'm going to show you a few things to look at later. All right. So there's a article or a section in Treat Lyme that I have about the odds of recovery. Okay. Let's see, where is it? Recovery time and odds. All right. And if you take a look at this article called Getting Healthy, Will I, When, How Do I? This is where I review some of those statistics that I just told you about how quickly do people start to turn around. Okay. All right. Now, to figure out if your daughter clinically has Babesia, take a look at the chapter called How to Diagnose. Okay, and you would want to look at this article called It Could Be Bartonella Babesia. See if there are enough symptoms there to say that she should still be treated for Babesia. Okay, and then in terms of how do you treat Babesia? Well, you can take a look at the infection treatment plans section here. And the article that I've written about that is called Kills Babesia, a Brief Guide. I give you a lot of different options there. The other option is take a look at my book. So it's in printed version where I review step-by-step plans for how to treat any of the infections that you might have in Lyme disease. Okay, so those are your two options there. Okay, let me go back here. All right. Good luck to you and to your daughter, actually, Jamie. Thanks for that question. Hello, Jennifer. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. My energy is so low and even sleep doesn't restore energy. I'm on nystatin and diflucan, so it's not yeast. I'm on hydrocortisone and herbs for adrenals, and I'm on Armour thyroid. I'm also on antibiotics, Malarone. I don't know how to figure out the cause. Can you help? So in turn, if I've got somebody, again, I mentioned earlier tonight that if a person's 6 to 9 months into treatment and their energy is not improving, I want to do mitochondria repair work. All right. That's what I would do with patients in my practice. And I found it helps about 40 to 50% of the time. All right. And I recovered that earlier tonight. So I'm not going to go back through the steps of mitochondria repair. If you are wondering what that is, take a look at the chapter at Treat Lyme called Energy and Fatigue. There's an article in there about power up, about energy and mitochondria. Okay. That would be the next step. The other thing I would say to you that I have found when I was treating patients at the Healing Arts Partnership is that Babesia, if I've got somebody with severe fatigue and nothing is lifting it, I'm going to really want to refocus to make sure that I got rid of Babesia. I'm going to look at all the symptoms that can suggest Babesia, and I'm going to see if a person still has a number of those, I may still want to try a different treatment approach for Babesia, because Babesia can be an extremely fatiguing illness. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Jennifer. Hello, Lee. Let's see. Thanks for these webinars. You're welcome. My son had IGeneX testing. It was positive for Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia. Oops, we already answered that one earlier. Hello, Devin. I think probably Devin's the right way of saying that. I hope that is, at least. Let's see. Dr. Ross, you talked about the difficulty of testing for Lyme, and I do understand that it's difficult. But what do you recommend for post-Lyme treatment, particularly for dizziness, brain fog, agitation, racing thoughts, feeling faint, etc., and a host of neurologic symptoms? Thanks for all you do. Bear with me here for a minute. Devin, part of the problem I'm going to have is I would need to ask you a lot of questions. And when I was still practicing up in Washington State, I was doing an online consult visit where people could ask me questions directly. We'd visit one-on-one, but I can't do that here in Texas. They would call that practicing without a license. So all I can do is just make a general comment, okay? And this is based on, again, what your symptoms suggest to me. So when you see dizziness, brain fog, agitation, racing thoughts, feeling faint, and a host of neurologic symptoms, that could be due to neurologic injury. That also could be due to mitochondria injury, all right? Now, the same steps that you take to fix mitochondria, I have found also often help with neurologic symptoms as well, too, again, based on my practice at the Healing Arts Partnership. So there's 2 articles I'd point you to. So in terms of doing repair work to see if that makes a difference. And they're actually pretty similar articles, but let me just show those to you real quick. Okay, so take a look at the chapter called Brain and Nerves. And I would take a look at these 2 articles. My brain isn't working, I think. What can I do? And brain fog and Lyme disease, you can fix it. Okay. Basically, the steps that I outline in both of these articles are the same steps that you would take as part of repairing your mitochondria. The energy factory is called mitochondria. And in patients that would have similar symptoms to what you're having, I would find I might try a mitochondria or this kind of a repair approach for about 2 to 3 months and see if it's going to start making a difference. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. And thank you for that question. Hello, Judith. Hello, Dr. Ross. Good to have you back. Thank you. Good to be back. Good to be coming out of boxes. The boxes have become my friend over the last few months, or 1 or 2 months here. Let's see. I was getting platelet-rich plasma injections in my knee prior to acquiring Lyme in August of 2017. I was told not to have any invasive procedures because of the Lyme germ. I am currently being treated for Lyme, antibiotics, biocide, nystatin, and recommended supplements for the past 4 months. Is it safe now to have PRP injections? In my opinion, okay, and this is my opinion, I don't see a contraindication, the reason you could not have them done. All right. In fact, the platelet-rich plasma is basically, it's probably got some stem cells in it, is probably why they were using that with you, is to help repair nerve injury. And stem cells can be a way of repairing injury from Lyme. So I don't see, in my opinion, I don't see a problem with doing those two together. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Judith. Hello, Katie. Thanks for what I do. You're welcome. And I hope you're getting settled slowly, very slowly. At least there's furniture out there, and I have a happy dog sleeping on the back couch and another happy one there. So when the dogs are happy, I'm happy. So anyhow, thanks for all you do, and I hope you're getting settled. I think I have resistant Babesia because I've been on Zithromax, Malarone, and Bactrim and felt great, but it stopped working. I'm currently doing coartem pulses, but feel this isn't enough. What are some antibabesial medications that combine well with coartem without increasing the risk of long QT? Okay, so in terms of things that you might combine with coartem, you could, that would not prolong the QT interval, okay? So tetracyclines can be helpful. In fact, when we treat Babesia, we're using anti-malaria medicines because malaria is a parasite and Babesia is a blood parasite, all right? So we have found it helpful to use anti-parasite medicines to treat those. Also, what is anti-parasitic are tetracyclines. In fact, in some parts of the world, still to this day, doxycycline is used, doxycycline as a tetracycline is used either as a preventive for malaria or to treat malaria, okay? And doxycycline, tetracyclines do not prolong the QT interval. So one thing that you could add to the coartem would be that, okay? I would not do the macrolides, which is either Zithromax or Biaxin, because they do prolong the QT interval. You could, in addition, work with an herb called Cryptolepis. Cryptolepis, I am not aware of causing any prolonged QT interval. Cryptolepis is an herb that comes out of Ghana. It's used to treat malaria quite effectively there. And a number of years ago, many of us that were practicing, or at that time when I was practicing, we added it into our practices and found it to be quite helpful too. The way you would do that is Cryptolepis as it's called Cryptolepis sanguinita, and you want to do 5 milliliters 3 times a day. I use a Wildcraft Herbs product for that. Be aware that Research Nutritionals has a product called Crypto Plus that is Cryptolepis with some other herbs added in. The dosing on that is different. You actually work up to 80 drops twice a day on that, okay? But if you're going to use a Wildcraft Herbs product, for instance, you're going to do 5 milliliters 3 times a day. So you could, if you want to bolster what you're doing with the coartem, things that would be compatible with it are doxycycline 100 milligrams twice a day, coupled with possibly a Cryptolepis, 5 milliliters 3 times a day. Those are things I think that could be compatible. Okay. All right. In terms of other ideas that you might want to take a look at in terms of other ways to go about treating Babesia, take a look at take a look at my anti-germ action plans in the section I have on Babesia there, or take a look at on the online guide that I have here. Look under infection treatment plans and take a look at the section called Kills Babesia, a brief guide. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. All right. Katie, thank you for that question. I appreciate that. Hello, Christine. They tested positive on 2 different tests for Lyme in the middle of mold treatment. What would you suggest as the next step? Hope all is well in Texas. Thank you. It is. It's good here, actually. So just a couple comments. I would need to know a lot more about what your specific symptoms are. But just as a general comment, it is possible to treat mold and Lyme at the same time. And generally, if I've got somebody that's got severe mold toxicity and Lyme, I'm usually going to start trying to get rid of the mold first. And at times I have found if you just get rid of the mold, what looks like Lyme symptoms go away and you don't even need to treat the Lyme infection. Now, that may sound kind of scary, so let me talk about that real quick. So our immune systems actually have the ability to either get rid of Lyme or keep it under control. And so if I've got somebody that has a strong history of mold toxicity and they've got Lyme, sometime, and keep in mind that both Lyme and mold trigger cytokine excess. And I talked about cytokines earlier tonight. Cytokines are chemicals made by white blood cells that white blood cells make to help get rid of infections, to help the immune system work better, but they also are made to help get rid of mold too, okay? Because the immune system attacks the mold toxins as well. So they're made to get rid of mold toxins, all right? All right, so they can look a lot alike. And so, for instance, if I'm taking a history when I was treating patients, if I was taking a history on somebody and I started asking them about their history, and then they'd tell me, I was doing pretty well, and then I moved into this house that had mold, and that's where I got sick. And it's also at the same time that I got my tick bite. Probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to do mold testing first. And if they're mold, and even Lyme testing, but if they both come back positive, I would probably spend about 2 to 3 months removing mold toxins first. And often that may be enough. So for instance, I've got a guy that I treated at the Healing Arts Partnership that basically had positive Lyme testing. He could not think at all. He gave up his job. He was unemployed for numerous years, severe fatigue, bad body pain. And he had seen another Lyme literate medical doctor, a naturopathic doctor actually in Seattle area, who told him he needed to be on IV antibiotics. He needed to fly out to Washington, D.C. to see GemSec to get on IV antibiotics. There was no hope for him. He needed to get on IV antibiotics. And I just sat and talked to him. I said, so tell me about your story. He goes, yeah, I got sick when I moved into this house. And I go, tell me about the house. The house was full of mold. I mean, it was pretty clear to me. So all we did, we spent 2 to 3 months not even addressing the Lyme infection, just removing mold toxins. And he got first 70% better, then 80% better, and 90% better. And because he got so well over 3 months, not all the way back, but so well over 3 months, I decided that maybe Lyme was not the problem, even though I had a positive test, that maybe it was all mold. Keep in mind also with mold that it causes mitochondria dysfunction. So if you get a lot better after 2 to 3 months of removing mold toxin, you're still not all the way there. One thing I found useful in my practice was to focus on repairing the mitochondria. And I talked with you about that earlier tonight. And with him, just doing that, over 6 months, he got back 100%. We never addressed Lyme at all. And that is because even though he has a positive Lyme test, I don't think Lyme is his problem. I think either it's a false positive test or that the infection has been managed by his immune system quite well. Okay, all right. So to answer your question, I would need to know a lot more about your specific situation, but to answer your question, make sure you've done enough to fix the mold situation before you necessarily go down the Lyme pathway. But if you do need to go down the Lyme pathway, I see no incompatibilities between doing mold treatment and killing Lyme germs at the same time. I don't think there's any incompatibility to that at all. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Christine. Thanks for the question. Hello, Kay. Let's see. I cleared my histamine rash with diet, but a patch of it has formed on my arm. I've cheated a little late with bites of humus and cheese, but it won't go away. I have added quercetin a few weeks ago, no change. I have added Zyrtec and now Pepsid with no change in the patch and the itching. Are the antihistamines bad for me at all, or can I continue with them for a while? Anything else to add? The histamine rash was my major symptom that led to my Lyme diagnosis. So does that mean my Lyme is not getting any better after 8 months of treatment? Okay. So first of all, even though, so you've got this one patch, the one thing that I would be interested in knowing, and the only way I'd be able to know is to take a look at it. But again, I can't look at it over the webinar here. Is, sometimes people get rashes that look like histamine rashes that might actually be more of a ringworm or a fungus infection of the skin. So I make sure your doctors take a look at that patch to make sure you're not having a fungus infection. Okay. All right. Now, if this is really due to histamines, histamines are manufactured by cells called mast cells. All right. And in some people, when they have Lyme infection, Lyme germs trigger the mast cells to make cytokines, but also to overproduce histamines. Okay. That's the relationship with Lyme infections. Mold can trigger mast cells to make too many histamines as well, too. And so histamines, what works with them is to use quercetin to stabilize the mast cells so they're not making it. But sometimes you've got to use antihistamines to block the histamines after they've been released by the mast cells. Zyrtec and Pepcid have antihistamine effects. I see no harm with anyone using those, okay? But in addition to the quercetin, you might want to step back and do more to stabilize your mast cells so they're not making or releasing the histamines as easily, okay? And in addition to quercetin, what you can use that stabilizes mast cells is something called luteolin. Luteolin is a very strong mast cell stabilizer. I have found it useful as a product that is a good product, because there's a lot of garbage luteolin out there, but a product called Neuroprotect has 100 milligrams of luteolin per pill. Now, usually I have people do one pill. I would have people do one pill 3 times a day, in addition to the quercetin. That would be my foundational approach to treating mast cell activation, along with being on a low histamine diet. And then if that did not work, then I might start adding in some of the antihistamines, as you have done here. But you could do one more thing, which is add that luteolin in. Okay. All right. That's what I had found helpful, at least in my practice. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Kay. Good luck to you. All right. So just one more thing here. So I'm going to do a quick screen share. Okay, so I actually never even came here tonight, but this is Marty Ross MD Supplements. If you're looking for ideas about what products do I think I have found useful in my practice, take a look here. If you're wanting to see what it is that has luteolin in it that I recommend, you would just type in up here. And this is that Neuroprotect product that I was telling you about. Okay. All right. All right. Go back here. And anyone can order from Marty Ross MD Supplements. It's for anyone. All right. All right. So listen, everyone, that is it for me for tonight. I've enjoyed being with you here. It's good to finally do this after a few weeks of traveling and getting myself reestablished down here in Austin. It's nice to be able to help people again. I really enjoy doing that. I appreciate your support. So 2 ways of supporting me so I can keep doing these webinars and writing material for you is either help. If you're looking for a source for supplements, take a look at Marty Ross MD Supplements. I appreciate that. Also, take a look at buy my book. There's good information in there, information you can share with your physician and give them some ideas as well, too. Okay. All right. In a second here, I'm going to take you over. I'm going to transfer you from me to Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. While you're there, you're going to land on the books page. I'd appreciate it. I really do appreciate it if you would buy that and spread the word about that book. Talk to your friends or people that are in your support groups about what I've been doing here, information that they might find helpful as well, too. I'd appreciate if you would do that. At Treat Lyme, you could sign up for next week's webinar. Feel free to do that. I have another one next week, and I have one at least scheduled the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but I'm thinking about whether we'll do that or not. But at least there's next week I will be on. And then again, tomorrow morning, keep a lookout in your email somewhere around 7:30 to 8:30 Central Standard Time.
you'll have an email waiting from me with details on how to get a copy or look at the recording. Okay? All right. Good night, everyone. It's been good being with you here.